boys. How we doing?
Good.
Doing
Quick,
well.
I know we maybe talked about it briefly, but quick weather update from various parts of the world. How's Homer, Alaska right now on the 8th of February?
It's freezing. It's absolutely freezing. No, it's we get these big warm spells, we get these big cold spells, and right now we're getting a cold spell.
So what's a cold spell in Homer look like?
There's if you got clear skies, it'll go down to -5 right now, and then as soon as the sun comes out in the afternoon, it'll go up to like 30 degrees, somewhere in there. And then so we get a couple days where it's cloudy, it just warms up, and then clear skies, everything freezes. And so you saw how everything was so tidal, when you guys were fishing. So when we get these little tides and really cold weather, the bay will actually start getting ice. It'll start freezing up, and then you get these giant tides, and it'll basically wash away. It'll work the ice out.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
I woke up this morning and it was a double jacket morning. It was cold, man.
What about Missoula, Montana, Dylan? How are we looking in Missoula these days?
It finally looks and feels like winter for basically the first time all winter. We're getting dumped on with snow, which was pretty nice. Well, nice and not nice. Last Friday, we went out and did a mountain goat study, kind of locally here. So me and a few other guys from Onyx hiked up into a drainage and just kind of set up for, I think it was like 4 or 5 hours. We were up there looking to try and count mountain goats. And it was like the first kind of nasty wintry day. So by the time we hit the peak, I think we were dealing with like 50-ish mile-an-hour gusts of wind and snow. So visibility was not prime for counting mountain goats on the opposed ridge. But then Saturday, I was able to go out and get some snowmobiling in on some really good snow. So yeah, it's cold. This week's looking like -15 for some lows with some highs around 0. So finally feels like winter in Montana.
Heck yeah.
Logie Bear, Pocatello.
Sunny and 42 here in East Idaho, dude.
Whatever.
I'm dead serious. It's so sunny. And
it's
like 42, breezy. It's always freaking windy here. But me and the wife are heading up to West Yellowstone this weekend to get some snowmobiling done. And it's supposed to snow up there starting Wednesday through the end of the week. But yeah, here, man, you could get a tan if you really wanted to.
That's how it was in Salt Lake, dude. It was like 57 degrees yesterday and sunny.
It's crazy.
Super wild. Well, we are going to do a deep dive on Kodiak today. That is the whole, we're going to relive some moments from our very first experience in Alaska. And by our first experience, I mean myself and Logan and Dylan. And then we have our special guest of the day, Mr. G, otherwise known as Garrett Lambert. He is a captain and really was the man in charge of our transporting services. Works for Ninilchik Charters. And if you guys watch our video series, you definitely saw some components of Garrett and what his first mate Brandon and him do for a lot of the year. Like that's their program. They're living out on Kodiak. So we've got Dylan from Onyx. Dylan again is part of the marketing team at Onyx and also was with us on a trip along with Matt Seidel from Onyx and a handful of other friends of friends. It was kind of an interesting way how the trip all came together, but at the end of the day, boy, it absolutely worked out as, I know Logan and I's favorite trip of the year for sure.
Easily.
I'm sure Dylan can attest to that.
Yeah, it was an easy favorite. More than just a year. I mean, I've been wanting to get to Alaska ever since I can remember. Never stepped foot in Alaska. I've been to northern British Columbia to where I could actually see some mountain peaks from Alaska, but that was the first time up there. So yeah, it was on the top of the list for a lot of years.
So we're gonna dive into some stuff that we were trying to like capture as much great hunting content as we could during the series and also try to share some information. But the reality is this is probably a better platform to dive in. So through social media, through feedback from the YouTube videos, we got quite a few different questions. We're going to do our best to help gain a little bit more visibility and insights as to what it would take to get up to Kodiak and do a similar trip to what we were able to do. I think overall, Alaska is intimidating for anybody that's not a resident there. Just there's a lot of barriers of entry. There's lots of logistics, travel concerns, costs. So we're going to try to break all those down, make it a little more palatable, and hopefully put it on your radar as something that you can do. I think, as we considered going to Alaska, this trip, more so than maybe others, really resonated with a lot of us because it's more available for kind of the average person to do. It's not one of those kind of once in a lifetime hunts of a Dall sheep or a brown bear that's going to cost significant amount of money, and frankly just isn't reasonable for most folks. Now, would we love to do that? 100%, but I think to me this Kodiak trip and chasing Sitka blacktail deer was a really good entryway into all things Alaska, and certainly something that with some planning and some savings and some research, I think is very doable for most folks. So that's gonna be the goal, man. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna relive some moments. Garrett probably has plenty more crazy stories from what he sees living up there for many, many months of the year. And hopefully at the end of this, you guys will walk away with something that's super helpful and if nothing else, insightful. So Dylan, at the end of the day, like, what was the best thing about the trip in your opinion?
Starting off with all the hard questions.
I'm just let's just throw it out there. What do we like the most? I mean,
honestly, for me, again, and not to reiterate, but it just getting to Alaska. Like you said, Kodiak or Sitka blacktail, I think, is more of an achievable hunt. I've been wanting to get to Alaska for 15 years. I mean, ever since I knew, I was old enough to watch videos of people hunting Alaska, I've wanted to get up there. But in all reality, I just didn't know when it was going to be possible. You'd look at moose hunts and a few other things, and really blacktail wasn't on my radar until a few years ago. I think, it's Garrett can attest, but I think it's for people in the lower 48, it's becoming more of a popular hunt. I personally know quite a few folks that have gone up and done this hunt, but really just getting up there and experiencing it was kind of the best part. And leaving Alaska, it was just like, when can I get back and do this again? And kind of going into it, I thought once I did Sitka blacktail on Kodiak Island, kind of just check it off the bucket list and be like, okay, next time I go to Alaska, maybe a caribou or something else, but I would totally go back every year and do the exact same hunt. So just experiencing it, all of Alaska. I think Kodiak's a great place to do it. Kind of like in my mind, Kodiak is Alaska. It's just pretty wild place. And then the people we were able to meet, Garrett, Corey, along the way were just, it just kind of encompassed it all and was super awesome.
Logie Bear, what are your thoughts? Initial thoughts, as you kind of recap and just put in perspective what we were able to do up there.
Man, so going along with what Dylan said, the adventure of it all, and it was my first time, your first time, Dylan's first time. So I think that was a big proponent, was the adventure of seeing stuff you've never seen. But I would have to say the best part was boat life, hands down. So for those of you that haven't watched our series or don't really know, the program of hunting blacktail with a charter is we went out with the Ninilchik charters. Garrett is a captain, and we had a deckhand named Brandon, a couple of great dudes. But it's literally you land into Larson Bay on a single prop airplane, and you bust down all your gear onto a boat, and that's home for the next however many days you're going to be there. And it's just the mobility aspect of the boat was huge to me. You're not landlocked as if you were in a tent. That was the coolest part. Each day you could be hunting a new zone that you'd never been to before, seeing new animals that you've never seen before. And I think the excitement of that alone, plus the camaraderie of everybody coming back to the same location, you're on a boat, great food, and the mobility aspect of that boat was, I could have been hunting anything. And that was the coolest part for me, was being able to move, try new things. And the amount of area you can hunt up there is insane. You could hunt a new zone every day for a month if you wanted to.
Yeah, no doubt. So Garrett, how does a guy from the Midwest end up living in Homer and working for months on end in the wildness, remoteness of Kodiak?
Yeah, I guess that's a great question. Kind of ask myself that every now and again. First off, thanks for having me. You guys
absolutely, man.
Absolute riot of a week to have with you. It's you don't get to choose, the people that necessarily come out with you the first time. And really like 99% of the people that I've been able to meet doing this have just been awesome. Absolutely make this not a job. You get to go out, watch guys figure it out, come back, just like you're saying, to the boat. There's like that camaraderie feeling, like you make it back off the hill, deer, no deer, whatnot. Like there's got to be a metric on the amount of high fives versus how awesome a week is. I could say that. Oh, I actually retired from playing rugby. I was going to school in Atlanta, and I thought, man, where is the farthest away place I can get from rugby? And it landed me in Alaska. I did an interview in a snow goose blind for Ninilchik charters. That like midway through the interview, a big flock came in and was landing on our face. I was like, I gotta call you back. Guns were coming out, and the guy, Mike was like, yeah, call me back. And he turns to his wife. He's like, yep, he's our guy. It ended up working out great. I came up here and I started right from the get-go, running fishing trips, running hunting trips. And now, we're doing about 220 trips a year. So quite busy, and couldn't ask for anything more. So big change. I was also incredibly wrong about rugby. There's a lot of rugby up here come summertime. The wife and I actually got married up at the Alaska Rugby Grounds there in Anchorage. Absolute beautiful pitch. For any rugby players listening, it's one of the best pitches I've ever stepped foot on. So all that being said, I kind of wanted to jump in on that feeling, because for you guys, it's the same thing for Brandon and I. We love to see that energy out of a hunting trip. There's some hunting trips where you're grinding in the hours. If you're doing whitetail in the Midwest, you're grinding in the hours on wind direction and sitting still, not moving, and you come back to a lodge, and and that's awesome. That was my life for years and years and years prior to this. But the boat, the idea that you get a wind switch and you can relocate and jump into a new bay and not have to worry about that necessarily, that weather coming up, is kind of awesome. Hopscotching around, going fishing, going hunting. Yeah, it's total candy when you think about a trip up to Alaska, right? You guys got to do that firsthand.
So the way, if you guys have followed along, we went to Alaska, arrived in Anchorage, and then we actually went to Homer to do some fishing before we even began this Kodiak trip. So we spent a couple of days in Homer with one of Garrett's good buddies, Corey Lewis, Captain Corey of Dakota Ocean Charters. And we went out and caught a pile of salmon and halibut and rockfish and just had a fantastic time. And that was kind of our very first taste of Alaska. We crushed the fish. And so once we got all the fish processed, clean, frozen, there was another gentleman on the trip, Brian, who lived in Anchorage, and he had some extra freezer space. So we essentially froze all of our fish and kind of just put it on layaway in Anchorage, while we then hopped on a plane and went from Anchorage to Kodiak City to begin this new kind of 7-8 days of hunting and what have you. So that was the way we began the trip. And, you certainly could have fished in Kodiak with Garrett and Brandon. They do it often, but because we got the fishing already kind of out of the way on those first few days at Homer, we decided just to really concentrate on hunting that entire week. So I think to, framing this thing, Garrett, what is like the biggest difference between a transporting service and a outfitter and guide service? I think for folks maybe not as familiar with all things Alaska, there's a lot of misunderstanding and misperceptions of how those are different, and or maybe if there are any similarities.
No, that's a great question, because Alaska is fairly unique in that sense for transport versus guide, doing a guided hunt. So your Alaska guide goes through a very rigorous protocol to be called an Alaskan guide. They go through years and years of training and testing. They test out for their units, And so, when you're going with an Alaskan guide, it's typically one-on-one, target species. It's a very, tight knit, personalized hunt. And they're great. And for all good reasons. My biggest thing is, switching gears, I'm a transporter. As a transporter, we've there's a protocol to learn the area and to know the area, but it's best way to describe it. I'm not allowed to say there's a deer here, right? Guide can take you up the hill and say, we're gonna go do this. I cater to the DIY hunter that gets that satisfaction from figuring it out, from learning the hunt, right? You're starting with whatever background knowledge you have, and any references you may have coming up. If you had a buddy that's hunted Alaska a couple times, that the difference is I take care of you when you get back to the boat. We dry you out, we feed you, we make sure you sleep good, and then we wake up in the morning, you look at the land, and you pick where you get to go, and that's our separation, and then you get to figure it out. So and what I've seen over the years is DIY hunters really gravitate to the transport style hunt, and then gentlemen that are just wanting either the possibility of a higher success rate or need to have that personalized help do the guided hunts, and they're equally respected for sure.
For sure. And just to clarify a couple of things. So in the state of Alaska, for non-residents, you are required to have a guide with you with a variety of species. Said species would be, sheep, mountain goat, brown bear, I believe are the main requirements, right? And then you have the ability to go more of a DIY, do yourself, for moose, for caribou, for Sitka deer. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff, but kind of that's the framework. So guided hunts are a requirement for non-residents in a variety of species. A lot of that has to do with safety factors, and also has to do with, making sure that you're taking a mature legal animal. So, getting into sheep and stuff, there's some variety, there's some variables there where you absolutely need to know how to judge a sheep to make it so it's a legal ram. Even in some of the moose hunting situations, which doesn't require a guide, there are some parameters you might have to hit depending on the tag you have. So again, Alaska is just so much different than others where, on the transporter side of thing, I think it's safe to say too, Garrett, like the safety of your clients is number one. And in Alaska, weather has such a huge component and factor into safety, particularly when you're on a boat, you're dealing with swell, you're dealing with the seas, wind, you name it. So that also probably has a huge component of, like one of your main responsibilities, I suppose, as a transporter.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Weather in Alaska is a little bit different than weather, back home for where you and I, most people know. Weather can kill you here, and you have to be really on top of it, understand the tides and understand what that wind's going to do, because we are boat based. So, there's a huge safety parameter, and the best part about what we do is I get to take care of that. So it's off your hands that you have to worry. Your focus is everything off the boat. My focus gets to be the safety and everything on the boat, and it makes it easy.
So Dylan, advice as far as like utilizing the onX app, obviously offline is huge. What would you recommend or suggest based on kind of what we learned? What do we use the most? Thoughts on that whole process, specifically tied to the DIY hunter, preparing to be up in a place they've never been before.
Yeah, for sure. You hit the nail on the head there. Offline maps is by far the biggest one. I had no idea, I knew where we were going to be flying into and the general area, but like me having never been to Alaska or on a boat-based hunt, charter like this, I wasn't sure if we would land there and then end up, 50 miles around the coast or anything like that. Like I just had no idea where we could possibly end up hunting. So in doing so, saving the maps like beforehand, like I saved the entire island of Kodiak. So basically wherever we were going to be, we were set. So what I did there is I saved one like 150-mile map. So basically you save a giant area, but it's got low detail, as you guys know, and then zoom in and save like a 5 or a 10-mile map and just kind of grid it across the entire island of Kodiak. So that was the big one. As far as like uses in the field, I think we can all attest that Kodiak is some pretty unforgiving terrain, and it's got some good places where you can hike up into different locations and some incredibly horrible places where you can hike up. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more, but one of the main things that I used the app for on the island was just tracking, where we were going. And a lot of the times it wasn't even to like get back the same way, but it was, tracking ourselves up to hike up from the beach up to a bench, and then realizing like on the way back down that we found a way better route. And so almost just like using those tracks to be like, okay, if we're going to go hunt this area tomorrow, like let's not go this way. Or, we found a good route out, so let's follow that track back up. And, the last day, you, myself, and Logan, we kind of hunted the same areas the day before. We found a pretty easy way to get up to elevation and a good glassing knob. So basically, we just used the track and followed it up to the same spot. The other really big thing that going into the hunt, I didn't realize this, that I would use it as much. Typically, when you're marking waypoints in the app, it's like, locations that you want to hit again, or a target deer or glassing spots. And we did all of that, but also marking kill sites was crucial, and just kind of comparing notes and sharing those with guys back on the boat. Kodiak, obviously, brown bears can be an issue. And so we would mark, where Brian shot a buck, we would mark that. And then just knowing the next day, which way the wind was blowing, there's probably a high potential probability that a bear is in that area then, or on the kill. So just, marking those waypoints to avoid that area, or to be smart about how we're hunting the same area. So those are the main things I would say. Offline maps, tracking, and waypoints were kind of the three big ones.
So again, tying it into the DIY component, this is where a little pre-work on your own before you even get to Alaska can be super beneficial. And to reiterate, what Garrett was saying, every morning once we were in our zones, we would tell him where we wanted to go. And so the bigger boat that we're actually staying on has two skiffs that are being drugged behind it, and those are our kind of like modes of hitting land, if you will. So we did actually end up spending more time on X than I would have guessed. And largely was due to where we were able to hunt with the weather conditions was in some thicker, more challenging terrain. Not a ton of shooting lanes where we were. There's parts of Kodiak that Garrett can probably touch on that are way more advantageous to like open landscapes, easier hiking. But where we were hunting, it was very thick and dense. And oftentimes we were searching for, on the satellite layer, where would there be some openings where we'd have like actually a chance to glass. If you think about, the beach, and then as that zero sea level, and then you've got, peaks up to 4,000 or 5,000 feet in some spots, I'm sure, where are the deer living? And figuring that out took a little bit of time, because we could see them everywhere from, literally on the beach up to 1,000+ feet of elevation, which doesn't sound like a huge change, but just the nature of the topography is such that it's quite an effort to get up to 1,000 feet where we were hunting on this particular trip. So we did a lot of like zooming in on maps, looking for those kind of openings, almost like meadows is what they would look like, that might provide us some shooting lanes and some glassing lanes. So that came in more handy than I would have ever expected. And certainly, like, again, not knowing what Kodiak looked like, we talked to a ton of people. Everybody had different advice based on where they've been or the time of year we've been. And to frame it, we were there from Halloween, so October 31st through November 6th is the week that we spent out there perusing around. And certainly those maps were awesome. Just And as the week went on and everybody's comparing notes with each other, really helped kind of understand, like where were we finding the deer? If we saw more mature age class deer, were those deer at different elevation levels? We were, I would say, just right around the beginning of the rut, probably hadn't kicked into like warp speed yet. And so a lot of the more mature, deer were not perusing the beach per se. They were still kind of tucked up and hidden away. So certainly good stuff there. Diving into like the boat dynamics, walk us through kind of what resources, how's the boat laid out that is going to be advantageous to a DIY guy? Like what could they expect if they were to come on board and do a boat type hunt?
Yeah, of course. This helps your entire prep for packing from home on out. So the entire boat is built for mobility and function. It's built for you to hunt as hard as you want when you come back. Whether it's an animal whole or quartered, broken down, when you get to the boat, you have a place that you can hang your meat. You can process it yourself right there. We have cutting tables, the whole nine. If you're wet, you can hang all your gear outside. If it's dry, or you need to go through it, you can bring it in. We have boot dryers. So no matter what condition you come back to the boat, we can flip you around, get you dried out, get you a shower, and then, get you back into hunting. So storage is just like anything when you talk about Alaska, you get a lot more options for storage for stuff. But the lighter you travel, the easier, the less packed down the boat is. Typical guys that I see that are pretty tuned in and have done this with us a few years in a row, they're going to be packing. They're going to have the backpack that they're hunting with full to the brim, and they're going to have one big bag. Anything else will be extra. And you're talking about warmth, rain gear, and then butchering gear. And it's funny, we have what we call a day one pack for new guys. When they're getting on the skiff the first morning and they hand you their pack to get in safely, you feel the pack and it feels like a 40-pound pack. You're like, oh, you're new,
So true.
By day 3, it's like a gun, a knife, and a water bottle, and your maps, and you're off.
So real quick, a couple things right there. So one of the most unbelievably advantageous benefits of G's boat was the dryer. I mean, that was an absolute game changer. I believe that was new for this season for you guys. They installed like what you'd find in a small apartment, like a stackable washer and dryer. We never utilized the washer, but the dryer was on point every single, late afternoon, evening. We just cycle through our stuff because you are going to be wet on Kodiak, period. Like you're going to get wet. We had awesome weather in the essence of not a lot of rain. Garrett would probably argue that it was terrible weather because he couldn't get us in certain places that might have been better hunting simply because the swell, the seas just wasn't safe. So we were kind of secluded and tucked into these various bays. In our being new though, for us, it was like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful out. We're not getting pounded with rain, but no matter what, you're going to get wet. You're hopping in the skiff, you're in and out, depending on the tides. There's a good chance you're going to be getting your boots wet, your feet wet. And then just walking through the brush, you have a high probability of just, again, getting wet. So the dryer was amazingly huge. One takeaway I know for me personally, I could have packed way less clothing and gear had I really understood that there was a dryer on board. I think most people, if you were to do like a float plane hunt where somebody was going to just drop you off on Kodiak, you might want to consider multiple pairs of rain gear, multiple pairs of boots, because again, like you don't have any way to dry out per se. But for this style of hunt on a boat, particularly the Ninilchik Charter's boat, Garrett's boat, it has a dryer. You can really minimize this type of gear. I know, Dylan, you could probably hit on this. Logan, you can hit on this. We all pack too much stuff.
Yeah, I probably had double what I needed. Same thing, I heard from everybody, you're going to be soaked. You're going to wake up, be soaked right off the bat and just be wet all day. And like you said, the weather was good in the sense until really the last day we didn't get rained on. And like the typical, what you would expect weather out of Kodiak, I would say. But I also didn't understand, like I've never hunted out of a boat, nor have I lived next to the ocean. And I just didn't really understand the tide changes. Like we would get dropped off in the morning and get right up on the beach, step from the skiff to land. And then when we would be picked up, I realized that the first night when we were packing out Logan's first buck, we basically had to wade into the ocean up to our knees before we could get into the skiff. So I didn't realize, the tide changes. So we definitely got wet, but yeah, I brought 2 pairs of boots, 2 pairs of rain gear, like multiple pairs of pants. And I think I used like 1 pair of pants the entire trip and the same pair of boots the entire trip. So I think I could have cut my gear almost in half, just knowing and realizing like, the boot dryers, if you need them, and the dryer, and just like all the accommodations of the boat. Yeah, I carried a lot of weight and gear through airports that never got used.
Yeah. Yeah, I was the same exact way, man. I mean, I think it comes down to is like know your boat, because, if we didn't have the dryer or boot dryers, then I would have needed that second set of gear so my wet gear could dry out while I was wearing a new pair. But that dryer totally changed the game. I think I wore the same outfit almost every day when I had, double of everything just on the boat, sitting in my bag, not doing anything. So knowing your boat, if you have that option with a dryer and a boot dryer, you really don't need that much.
How about Logan, is there any pieces of gear that you wish you would have had, you didn't bring?
The one piece of gear is the piece of gear that you pulled out that one day was the spikes on the boots. That would have been very advantageous, just trekking up the hill. Right from the beach, it cuts from beach rock to pretty, not vertical, but pretty dang steep. And if you had a cold night where there was a freeze, the ground would be very slippery. And just a small item like that, the boot cleats, it was just, people have probably seen them before. It's like a rubber, like a bungee cord strap on.
They're called micro spikes.
Yeah, so micro spikes. It's something very small that you can pack in your bag. That if it was hot one day and the next you had a freeze that night, just getting up that hill and knowing that you're not going to slip, bump your gun. I was carrying the gun that day and I was so nervous that I was going to slip and fall on the rifle. But just that one small thing of spikes would be my number one thing I wish I would have brought. You could put them on in less than a minute and you're trekking up the hill, no problem. Brian smoked us up the hill that day. I think we said like 5 different times that we wanted those spikes.
Yeah, I had
Dylan, how about you?
I had 2 pairs of those actually at home. I just used some this past weekend hiking around, and yeah, I would say that would be a game changer for sure. One of those things that you probably won't need 80% of the trip, but the one time you do need them, they're definitely worth their weight. As far as, outside of that, I felt like I was pretty dialed, but I was dialed because I had way more than what I needed. Like packing, there are several things that I would look at while packing and like pick it up and then take it out of like the pile of stuff that I was going to take. And then it found its way back in it. Cause it's just like, I've never been there. I have no idea what it's like. You reading about it and hearing what you need from other folks helps a lot. It goes a long ways, but there's always that uncertainty without you having step foot there. So I think I was pretty dialed and had more than what I needed just because I wasn't sure exactly. But yeah, the spikes would have came in handy. That was one item that I took out of the bag and I wish I would have left in.
Well, it's that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, G, what's the most common item people wish they brought that they did not bring?
You guys said it already. Those micro spikes are absolute game changers. It's a saving grace. You basically prep for a goat hunt that you're going to start from the water, right? Is the best way to put it. Micro spikes and then getting in and out of the skiff. That's probably the most overseen component I could tell you, because you can kind of get away with gaiters, with a good set of gaiters, getting in and out of the skiff. But some nights, you guys saw that. Some pullovers would be absolutely perfect. And there's a couple companies that make a really good set. What are they? Wiggies? They're Wiggies.
Wiggies.
Yeah, those are absolutely amazing because it takes 2 seconds to not get them on and off. And I've even had guys take them up the hill. So when they get to a creek crossing, which the other group there was going after goats, they did a creek crossing in garbage bags, which was, Wiggy's, poor man's Wiggy's. I've had groups take them up the mountain, and they were able to be successful because of it. And it doesn't take that much weight.
Yeah, I would say that is certainly one item none of us brought. Our groups that were hunting, Logan, myself, Dylan predominantly, never needed them per se. I think the blend of a good pair of rain pants with gaiters over the top of your boots with rain pants factored into that is awesome for the in and out of the skiff. We did have one night with a bad tide where we definitely were like knee deep trying to jump in the skiff. Got a little bit wet, but again, because of the boot dryers and honestly just the heater vents in the boat, by the next morning your stuff was completely dry. So that didn't end up being an issue whatsoever. But the portable kind of lightweight waders is something that a lot of folks recommended to bring. Another big recommendation from a gear standpoint was like some kind of like maybe a leather water treated glove or a waterproof glove that when you're picking your way up through the thick willowy aspeny garbage that you have to get through, your normal soft shell type hunting gloves aren't going to get soaking wet. So that was a nice thing that we ended up using. Logan and I bought some like very Alaskan fishing kind of gloves that Corey had on his boat. They're like
this is
softly lined stuff.
This is a tech
tip. Rubber on the outside. Yeah,
this is huge. So if you're at home, you've probably never heard of these. I'm gonna guess they're Showa gloves. SHOWA. They make them in different gauges, and it looks like a glove that looks like if you showed up to hunting camp with this glove, your buddies would probably make fun of you. But dude, they're awesome.
Very, very Alaskan.
Very Alaskan.
Homer has them in like every store, I feel like, but that was super nice as well from like a gear standpoint. I've got this breakdown of what I packed on our gear list. Logan can overlay this here and kind of show you, and we're going to try to make this like a shared Google Sheets links. So if somebody had the inclination to just want to click on it and download it, it's at least a starting point. This is by all means is not 100% right. This is just what we took. And I've kind of optimized the list based upon after having actually been on the trip and like knowing like what I didn't need. Again, depending on the type of hunt. To Garrett's point, like a bottle of water, your bag lunch, and your knife kill kit is really all you needed to go out hunting. Now, it was a little different for us because we were trying to capture content. So we had like spotting scopes, cameras, more optics than maybe your everyday hunter would have. You certainly didn't need all of that per se. Like where we were hunting, you could glass pretty easily with just your binos. The spotting scope was super nice to get the phone scope footage on and just really kind of try to get the quality of the animal a little bit more dialed in once we learned kind of more about what we're looking for. But anyways, you won't need a whole lot. And that's the beautiful thing again about being on the boat. So I think we could optimize like so much. If we were to go back, I definitely would pare stuff down pretty substantially for what we took. So jumping back onto the boat. So we've got the back end of the boat is dialed for meat processing. There's a big like cutting board table. There's a hose. I mean, you have everything you need. You've got places to hang the meat and let it age with a hint of salt water, over the few days before you would want to cut it up and get it into a freezer. So you guys have, how many freezers are on board?
Oh, we have 3. Yeah, we have a massive chest freezer. We have 2 stand-up freezers, and then we have a fridge freezer. We were able to carry both enough food for our duration in Kodiak as well as enough space so that everything that you're bringing on the boat, you can either hang it or you can freeze it immediately. And I get guys that bring all their processing gear, vacuum packer. They bring that with them because they enjoy doing all that work with their with their fellow hunters right there.
Yep.
So at the end of the evening, they'll take if they're successful, they'll take the deer in a assembly line, and one guy will trim, move it to the next guy, he'll pack it, vacuum seal it. Last guy puts it in the freezer, and at the end of the trip, they can take that product, go home, and the wife doesn't, go nuts at the mess they're about to make. So they just walk it right into their freezer, and it's good to go. So yeah, the functionality of both keeping your gear, basically in lockers, hung on the back deck. All your weapons are safe. We have spots for the guns, spots for the bows, and then the washer dryer, the boot dryer, the fridge freezer. It's all built so that from the time that you're on the boat to the time that you're off, there's a little bit of a comfort to it, and we're always adding to the machine, right? We're always trying to make the wheel a little better. Our project this winter, that shower that we're working with, we're wanting to make that a little nicer shower. So we're going to double the size. So, not to do an Herbal Essences commercial every day, but it's just adding to it.
Yeah, the shower was one of a few guys took advantage of for sure. A lot of us didn't.
You didn't even touch it. You guys were like,
didn't even touch it. Ain't got no time for that, man. Let's go hunting. But it's there. Like, that's a super nice feature. There's 2 restrooms on board, so again, comforts of home. You got the fridges, the freezers. We didn't take processing equipment in the sense that was like anything fancy. We just straight up Ziploc bags with some Sharpies. Everybody would label their own stuff, what it is. And then, you got it in the freezer. Typically, we would let our animal hang for a day or two, then get it cut up, thrown in the freezer. Also, which we'll get into a little bit later, there's some other types of hunting. So we were able to put like anything we wanted to mount or take home, or like capes, ducks that needed to be mounted, taxidermy type stuff. Again, all can be thrown in the freezer. So you're going to completely have everything you need, and it's not going to potentially spoil. So that was a huge factor. Also, so walk people through like a typical, what's a typical day like from Dylan? You made a comment about this. You wrote about it in the Onyx blog. But what was our alarm wake up call every day? Like, so start us off from the beginning. We'll kind of give you guys an example of like a typical day and what you would be able to expect.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, definitely the coolest way that probably any of us had ever been waking up. So basically Garrett would find like a perfect pocket in like a tight little bay usually for us to put down the anchor and sleep that night. So basically every night I didn't feel the boat rock once. No. You're just super tucked away. Obviously he knows all the nice little spots there for calm waters, even when, out in the bay it wasn't so calm. But basically we'd throw down anchor, sleep, and then our alarm clock was basically Garrett there pulling up anchor. So they're on big, it's a big metal chain, and from the bunks where you were sleeping, you could kind of feel it too. So every chain link that would come up through that, it just would kind of rattle the boat, obviously makes noise. So that's kind of how we got woken up every day. And then the loud kind of thud of the anchor hitting the deck there. So yeah, pretty cool, unique way to wake up each morning. And then we'd start out the day, few hours, probably an hour and a half before daylight, usually get woken up.
Well, even before that, right? Like we'd wake up to the anchor pulling up and then get seated. Yep. And then Brandon would legitimately have coffee brewing. He'd have breakfast already cooking. So yep. As you're kind of getting dressed and ready for the day, it's still dark out. Garrett is looking out weather and wind conditions and all the safety factors of, where we might be able to go start out hunting wise. And then Brandon's got breakfast cooking while we're all kind of getting things organized. And so you literally would come out of the bunks up the stairs, and breakfast is basically like on a plate for you. Yeah, no, it was pretty awesome. A lot of times we would hunt right from where we were sleeping, or there was a few days where, we had a short commute, 20-30 minutes or whatever. So as we're eating breakfast and kind of gearing up and getting ready for the day, if we needed to move locations, depending on where we wanted to hunt, like the night before, a lot of the time we would
look at maps and talk about what everybody saw. And, there was a few days in particular with me, Brian, and Logan here that we wanted to go back to the same spot. So like the night before, we would say, hey, Garrett, in the morning, we want to be dropped off, at that same spot. We saw a buck that we want to go check out, see if we can't get eyes on again. Or if not, it was kind of a shuffle of a few guys wanting to go here. And it's like, hey, who's going with who this morning? Where's everybody going? Look at the maps and get stuff figured out. So yeah, it was pretty awesome.
So that's kind of how we get started. We'd have the breakfast in the morning. Garrett would start running skiffs, shuttles. So there'd be various groups of, anywhere from 3 to 4 guys typically, maybe a couple pairs, just depending on who wanted to go with who that day. And because we had 10 total folks on the boat. That's what it was, right?
Yeah. You got to tell them about the exciting, like how exciting that part is, because
so I was going to get into that. I mean, Dylan mentioned it, but a lot of times we're glassing right as light is coming off, over the mountain horizons. We can start to see everybody is out and about glassing around the boat, because it didn't take us long to figure out that it's a game-rich environment, whether it's fox or deer, your bears that we're seeing, mountain goats. I mean, there's a lot of game to be looked at. And so it's just super fun to wake up in a new bay, and just start immediately glassing and trying to figure out, gosh, what we could see. And so many times we saw, deer on a various point or a beach that we wanted to go check out, and we'd actually go ahead over that way and had some luck. But there's a ton of excitement every morning as guys are getting ready on that back decks area, where potentially you've got some game already hanging by a couple days in. And Garrett's just like taking these trips out and dropping people off. And it's like, all right, boys, T-3 minutes, get your stuff ready. Here comes G. Brandon would stay on the boat, obviously, and kind of get us all prepped up and ready to rock. And then Garrett would take us to wherever we told him we wanted to go. And there's definitely a lot of excitement each morning throughout that process.
That brings up a really good point, Brian. You guys were doing, we're basically breaking out right there at first light, and you guys are getting some homework, before you're heading out. You're like, hey, we really want to get back over to that patch. It looks like you guys actually saw a couple deer there before we headed out from the big boat. And so this plays into the transporter role. A guide, if you're guiding, you see that deer, you can run right, you can run in as close as you want and harvest that animal. For the transporter side, and we dealt with this because we had such a cold snap of weather. All those young bucks were running does left, right, and upside down, and it was halfway hard to find a place without deer, right? So when we were getting on them, and you guys were awesome about this, is we would purposely get you down the beach and down a way so that you guys would be able to break out and actually go hunting, rather than it changes it from like that kind of what we call in Alaska road hunting mentality to actually, you got your homework done, we kick you off over here and you guys get to go do that, because that's the fun part. That's why we hunt for that experience. Yeah.
And there's a lot of things too, even weather-wise, where we said, hey, can you get us over to this point? And then based on the conditions when we got out there, it's like, well, honestly, with the tides, I can't drop you off here. So we're going to have to look for a new spot. Eventually, we'd always find like the right spot that worked, from the transporter standpoint, from just pure safety and the tides, and then also got us in an area that we could get out and go hiking. Logan, thoughts on the hiking situation? What was it? Because when you hear like talking terms, we hit up to 1,000 foot of elevation, or, we did 2 miles in a loop. It doesn't sound that hard if you were to compare that to what we do in like elk season, right?
Yeah. So the thing is I would say, in some parts of the places that we would hike through, 300 yards on Kodiak Island's like 1.5 miles equivalent to hunting around Idaho. As dealing with brush, picking your way. There's sometimes you'd be going and you'd have to backtrack and say, there's no way that we can get through that. But that being said, with the thickness of the brush and the steepness of some parts, you got to remember you're at sea level. You'd be hiking, going, lose your breath a little bit. You stop for 15 seconds And if you're acclimated to, you know, Montana, Idaho, Utah, hunting in higher elevations, you get your breath back really fast. And that's something that Dylan brought up like day 3. He's like, are you guys noticing this? I was like, dude, you're right. Like, it's an oxygen rich environment. So navigating the brush is a little bit difficult. That's where looking at satellite view from onX can help you, or like we said earlier, marking your path on a easier traverse terrain. But I mean, like after I killed my buck coming out, we did not pick the right route 3 different times. And if you don't, if you're trying to go out a way you didn't come in that you don't know about, I would strongly say not to do that, because we ran into, it was like, are we ever going to, you can see the boat down in the bay and it's like, that's where we need to go, but you can't really see what's below you, and you'll pick a route and start going down and then get cliffed out or hit an area that's way too thick and you have to backtrack back up to that one point. So I would say, yeah, it's a little bit difficult to navigate, but as like a cardio standpoint, it's a lot easier than you might anticipate. It looks rugged, looks steep, but you catch your breath really fast.
Yeah, I think Brian said it best mid-trip when he's like, sometimes you just have to go full hedgehog, and he wished First Light made a onesie full of just
Cordura
one piece.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no doubt that terrain is unforgiving, and it is harder. Like visually, it doesn't look hard to get to, but it would definitely take some effort and time. And you know, we were pretty fortunate. We only had one pack out in the dark, which is our very first day on Kodiak. Logan killed a great buck, and by the time we got it broken down and stuff, it was well past dark trying to get to the boat. And like Dylan mentioned, we kind of went through some sucky stuff, but I think that's just part of the experience. You got to just like mentally prepare. You're going to have some really terrible situations you're going to deal with, but you got to embrace it and just enjoy it, because that's half the fun of being on Kodiak, or frankly any parts of Alaska. But it's just eventually you're going to deal with being completely drenched, or you're going to be cliffed out multiple times with the pack on, or you're going to, you know, have some bear encounters that are going to be super awkward and, you know, potentially frightening at first. You're going to run into some thick stuff that you just can't get out of. I mean, all of those dynamics are just kind of part of the course. And it's good with a couple buddies too, because you can just kind of laugh at how ridiculous everything is at the moment. But that would be a typical day, right? We'd get out, we'd hunt pretty much all day, you know, exclusively, where we didn't have any particular issues with, you know, needing to get back to the boat. I'd say the only times we came back to the boat were when we were successful and needed to bring some deer back. But we plan on staying out. We typically pack a lunch either that morning or the night before, you know, your classic sandwich, kind of candy bar, granola bar, chips, you name it. Bottle of water, and that's all we really ended up needing. And then everybody was equipped with a couple things. We all had GPS in-reach devices, so satellite communication, mostly as a backup if we needed it. And then every morning, each group would have at least 1 or 2 radios. So we had constant communication with home base. And in the event we needed to get picked up because we had a successful hunt or just an unsuccessful hunt, we had that ability to communicate with Garrett and Brandon. Again, from a safety standpoint, fantastic to have those with us at all times. There was a couple instances too where we, you know, Garrett said, "Hey, we've got a weather window. You guys can probably go hunt for 3-4 hours, but depending on how the weather shapes up, we might have to come pull you because there's going to be a wind change, which then, you know, we just wouldn't be able to like be in this area. We need to kind of move along." So again, so much of what you do on a day-to-day basis is weather driven as far as where you can hunt. And again, that's the beautiful thing about having, you know, a transporter is they can kind of help navigate those waters, so to speak, from a safety standpoint, and then get you in an area that you can kind of, you know, you can see everything. You can look at your maps and say, all right, let's try this as a new spot. But we get picked up, we get brought back on to the boat. And just like when we woke up, typically food would be in preparation mode from Brandon, and we'd be getting dinner kind of primed, prepared, ready to go. Guys would be getting clothes in the dryer, just kind of, you know, taking care of animals if we had them. And, you know, dinner was essentially just about ready for us. We'd typically share a group dinner. recap all the fun days and stories, and then, hitting the rack in the bunkhouse at a reasonable hour, because you got to get up and do it all over again. But that is more or less like a full day, what that kind of looks like. And as much as it maybe sounds like repetitive and a little monotonous, like there's no real monotony to it. It's so cool every morning waking up in a different spot, and just again, the game rich environment that it is. Again, like one kind of quick question, G, that came up was, how many guys does the big boat require to book it? And are there any other options? I believe, you've got Ninilchik has 2 different boats that are going to help satisfy 2 different, size of groups, if you will. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. We have the Sunday and we have the Rainy Song. The Sunday is a 6-pack vessel. The Rainy Song's an 8-pack vessel. So you can take 6 guys on the Sundays. You can take 8 on the Rainy Song, and I mean that goes up and down. What we've really fallen into is kind of keeping those numbers, right? We've done mixed groups in the past, and we still will for a week here and there, where there'll be groups of 2 or groups of 4. But predominantly, what we're moving towards is single boat, single group. It always works out. It's always it's beneficial for the guys that are coming on board. Now, that being said, we've had people, guy tears his ACL a week before he comes out, and he's hobbling around, so they're trying to fill a spot, and we try to help him do that to help with costs. And we get a guy from Anchorage that has some free time. He's like, yeah, I'll do Kodiak for a week. They end up becoming that group. Like, that's a true story. Those guys come out every year now, and plus the Anchorage guy. So they get to meet up, and now, there's something about killing yourself on top of a mountain to pack a deer out, running from bears, that makes you a little tighter. So yeah, typically we see most of our groups are 4 or larger. And really in the last few years, it's been just single boat groups. And that is the way to do it. And that's what I would highly suggest. It makes for a great trip, because when I wake up and I'm talking to you, yourself about the day, you're speaking for everyone.
Super good to know. That kind of leads us perfectly into probably the most commonly asked question. So let's dive into some cost factors here. Again, got this spreadsheet built out. Logan can kind of show it for those of you watching on the video here. But we're gonna try to do as good of a job breaking down cost wise. So to start out, a couple things. This is where planning comes in, big time. And to reiterate the idea of going with a group, this is where you can divide and conquer as a group of buddies. It shouldn't all fall on one person to plan in this entire trip, because there is a lot of logistics and things to consider and figure out. It's also great from splitting costs on certain things, and we'll get into that with certain hotel rooms and things of that such, baggage fees, what have you. But having a group of guys, whether it's a group of 4 to 6 guys or 8 guys, is certainly not only a lot of fun, but just a way to help kind of divide and conquer. Like, Dylan, dude, you're responsible for looking into our flights. Logan, you got the hotels research. I'll take care of the Ninilchik charter part, and everybody can kind of do their piece and come back as a group and share what they found out. So first and foremost, we got to talk through flights. So wherever you live, you got to get to Alaska, which means you're going to start by arriving in Anchorage. That's where you're going to end up more than likely. The cost on that is so dependent, right? It's just like, how soon are you going to book that flight in advance, and what are the particular going rates? We had some crazy challenges with COVID this year. Alaska required to have a negative COVID test upon arrival. And so, that's just like another layer into the logistics. It was a little unique. That certainly might be the case for 2021, maybe 2022. Who really knows where this is going? But first and foremost, you got to figure out your flight. And I would say, obviously, in a lot of cases, earlier the better. So if you do book a trip, get that flight on the calendar right away. And then once you get into Anchorage, depending on where you're coming from, you might need to factor in a hotel stay on arrival into Anchorage. You might not. there's only currently one main flight from Anchorage to Kodiak City every day. And so you kind of have a short window. It's not like in some other major cities where maybe they have 3 or 4 flights a day. It's kind of one flight on a bigger plane, but you're going to go then from Anchorage to Kodiak City. You can probably talk on this, but what do you recommend when people arrive in Kodiak City? Do you typically like to have like a buffer day where you get there, grab a hotel, and then plan on kind of flying out, on a charter flight the following day?
Yeah. I can absolutely touch on that. So tip on a non-COVID timing, there's 4 flights, 3 to 4 flights that'll hit Kodiak from Anchorage. With COVID and bookings, there was 1 flight, and that's what you guys were dealing with. This upcoming season will also have health mandates still in place. I had a long conversation with the Alaska Health Department last week, coincidentally. So because we're working on that right now with fishing. So you will have to find a rapid test to get into Kodiak or to get into Alaska. Once you hit Kodiak itself, yes, buffer day 100% on both coming and going. So if your hunt starts on Saturday, make sure that you are fully there on Friday. Some people get really crazy and do it Thursday because they've been stuck there. We've had ground fog for 4 days at times. It's not overly common, but it happens every year. There's always cancellations or always windows. I've had groups come in 2 days early on a Thursday, and Island Air will call them, say, hey, if you guys want to get out, we're gonna pull his guys out of the field on Friday, and we'll just swap you back in. Otherwise, nobody's flying on Saturday. And that's incredibly beneficial, because otherwise you're sitting at the Best Western, on your phone for 2 days. So a day on either side. When you come back in, you're flying out on that Friday, and then make sure that your flight is a Saturday afternoon, so that if it does, leaving Larson Bay, so that when you're flying out, if it is canceled and we are able to get you out on the morning or an afternoon flight, you can still make that afternoon flight. So yeah, try to really put a good buffer on your travel, because Kodiak's not forgiving. You guys got to see a little bit of that. I don't think we had any flight issues personally, but the week prior we did.
Couple key points there. One thing that was cool, like once you get into Alaska, they're a little more lax with like your baggage capabilities. So you bump up from, on most flights, it's like 2 bags typically plus a carry-on. Once you get like from Anchorage to Kodiak City, and also Kodiak City to Anchorage, you're allowed 3 bags, which helps just in cost reduction, particularly coming out heavy with meat. The hotels in Kodiak is, again, something you would want to book sooner than later in your trip preparation and planning. And like Garrett recommended, a buffer day on the front end and the back end. Again, a great way to share costs with friends. And I'll say Alaska is built for hunting. They really are. Like the transporters from the airports to the hotels, typically dialed in with big vans, so you can fit a pile of people. I will say, when you arrive in Kodiak City, most of the hotels will have a shuttle, but if you get an influx of people showing up, you may consider an Uber or a cab or something along those lines, because what we ran into is 5 groups of anywhere from 4 to 8 guys stacked up waiting for hotel transportation. It was raining at the time, kind of crummy weather. So that's just a suggestion is, you're going to deal with potentially waiting around, but the hotels are built for your gear. Most of them have, meat storage on the way out. So you can keep your stuff frozen. Island Air is also great with that as an option. And just overall, make sure you get your hotels booked in advance. So that leads us to like baggage fees. Depending on, again, your status with airlines. If you're higher status, you may have some bags for free. If you don't fly a whole lot, you can probably expect to pay some baggage fees. I think most of us on the way there, we had Logan and I shared a rifle, but we had 1 rifle case. We each had 1 duffel, and then we had our packs that we wore as like carry on the airplane. So that's kind of how we structured at least arriving there. Again, paring down after knowing more, I think you could still be pretty much one duffel, one rifle case, and your backpack carry-on as a whole, and be pretty dialed. So from that, we then dive into like more of a traditional fixed cost, which would be like our transporter cost. So G, walk us through, they book a trip with Ninilchik. What does that include?
So that includes everything from when you get to the boat to when you leave the boat. So we have all of your lodging, transportation, food, the whole nine. So, some guys, you have your little, your little gummy bears or whatever you're super into. Whenever you go on a hunting trip, you gotta pack, Vienna sausage or something, completely disgusting that you love. You can bring all those, but we have everything. We have everything. All you have to do is make sure that you're legally licensed. You have all your tags, all your permits, you're like your salmon, your king salmon stamp if you want to do any fishing, anything of that nature, so that when you step on the boat, I got you covered. So you can basically set up shop and everything is good to go. We have all the bedding, minus your sleeping bag. It's the only thing that you'll have to bring a sleeping bag. So outside of that, you're good. You got your gun, your license, and a bag.
So you'll basically, once you're in Kodiak City, that next day you would hop on a charter flight. It'd be through Island Air, who operates everything from like these traditional flights that took us to Larson Bay, which we are in a Cessna 208 Caravan on our group because it was a big enough group. They have a few different plane options there. They also are one of they are probably the main place for float planes if you were to do in a different kind of environment. Island Air runs a lot of those flights. That is what's going to get you out to Larson Bay. So
and we cover that too.
That's included in the package, right?
Well, the flight cost is not, but we do schedule you. We make sure that you have a spot.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you book with us, we call Island Air. We're like, here's our guys. And then you're on the manifest. So when you show up, they say, hey, Ninilchik guys, awesome. You're all good to go.
Okay. So give us like a per guy breakdown. If somebody was to book with Ninilchik for a 7-day trip, whether they have a group for the Sunday or the rainy song, what's that cost pencil out to? Plus what are we looking at for like a rough cost on, the charter flight through Island Air?
Yep, super easy. So typically we charge $34.50 per hunter for the week. You fly in on a Saturday morning, you fly out on a Friday afternoon. That cost, we do give leniency to single groups, and that's why we push for it. It's a very enjoyable trip that way. So if you fill up the boat, then that price comes down. And we will typically take about $400 off per person, which, we want to help you cover tags, cover some of the expenses getting out here. And, most importantly, we want you to have a great time. So chartered flight is going to be right around $150. Your first 50 pounds is free from Island Air. You got to expect that you're going to be packing out heavy, or hopefully. So you'll be spending about 50 cents a pound to pack out. So if you shoot an animal, you're going to harvest about 40 to 50 pounds of meat off of each animal that you harvest. So about 25 to 30 bucks per animal to get it out at most. On top of that, $150 chartered flight, and it's $150 each way. It was $125. That I think it went up to $150. We'll double check that after the podcast, but not bad. They get you in, get you out, and you're flying in on a caravan. So that's your flight.
Real quick on that, on the Island Air charter flight, a couple of things. So G talked about it a little bit, but if you do have your own food snack preference, you're obviously going to want to grab that when you're in Kodiak City. Same thing if you're into any kind of adult beverages or cocktails, you're going to want to grab that as well and include that in the caravan. The way we did it, we just packed everything on the scale that we took. We were able to peel our rifles out of our gun cases, leave those at Island Air and store them. So that reduced some weight there. Most of us had like some kind of like a lightweight, gun sleeve or something. And then they did a really nice job of just like packing it safely. So you didn't have to worry about getting your firearm kind of banged around. But you'd want to add, anything like that to this charter flight. And what we did is just took the total amount of the weight, factored in whatever it was over, and then we just divided it by the guys in the group. So even though, you know, Dylan might have had 10 more pounds of stuff than Logan, we just like equaled it out. And it was just super easy. I would say it's take what you want to make it fun and comfortable. So just it's minimal amounts of dollars in the grand scheme of thing. And I think, again, stuff that you'd want to just bring with you. So just wanted to touch on that, you know, real quick, specific to the Island Air charter component.
You do want to aim for that 60 to 100 pound mark if you can, just for the guys at home.
Yep.
Typically, that's what I'll see from a guy that's proficiently packed, is right in that 60 to 100 pounds, and that's a big waiver because he may be packing the spotting scope. You know, when I do this hunt personally, between me and my two other buddies, we go as a 3 team. So everyone has binos. One person carries a spotter, and then we'll carry 2 guns. And then the third person will be just have a firearm, you know, a sidearm of some form, 44 mag, 454, 500. The 10 millimeters popular. It works. It's a little cute for our guys.
Why you gotta hate on the 10 millimeter?
I've got one, but I don't trust it.
So that's a great little segue real quick, as we're talking kind of like gear breakdown. Let me finish just the cost thing, but we'll get into the sidearm real quick. So the last kind of component we talked about already, but when you're coming out, you're successful, you're going to have the overage fee again, that's going to increase more so on the charter flight. And then you're definitely going to have additional baggage on your commercial flights. So you're going to have meat boxes. In a perfect world, you're going to have all your frozen meat, any capes that you want to bring home, the antlers, you name it. Ninilchik has the meat boxes on board. And, you know, on the last day when you're kind of wrapping things up, it's a group process. Everybody's getting their boxes identified, labeled, taped, packaged, completely dialed. That way, once we get back into Larson Bay, we can put them back onto the caravan and they're ready to rock. Again, once you come back into Kodiak City, whether it's the hotel or Island Air, there's a lot of options for meat storage, freezer storage, keeping everything good to go until you catch, you know, your flight back to Anchorage the following day. And so those are things to consider, because I know we increased a couple ways. We had the fish from early on in our trip, plus we had the success from Kodiak. So we each added another 2 to 3 bags, depending on how it shook out. The boxes get you about 60 pounds of meat, typically, I'd say, right around in there. And so, yeah, that's going to add some baggage fees. So Logan and I, for example, each paid $350 in baggage overage heading back to Salt Lake City, where we flew to. And then when we got into Anchorage, we ended up staying, again, had a lot buffer time. So we grabbed a hotel in Anchorage, but the Anchorage airport has storage as well for your meat. I think we stored 7 of our bags and it cost like $87. So pretty realistic. And it was just nice not have to try to lug all your meat boxes, bag, rifle cases to the hotel. You could just literally take it right downstairs in Anchorage airport, leave it there. They open, I want to say at like 4 or 5 in the morning. And we were able to grab that before we headed back to town. So that kind of covers the cost basis. Again, you start doing the math, looking at the spreadsheet, adding things up. It'll get you to where, you know, a pretty good estimate. Some of them, once again, are so dependent on how soon you book them and time of year, supply and demand of flights, things of that nature. But overall, again, I think this is a very doable flight or doable hunt for a lot of folks. I really do. That if you spend a little time planning, a little time saving, very, very doable kind of starting trip to Alaska. Conversely to sheep, goat, moose, some of those other brown bear, you know, the big ticket items that are going to be substantially more. All right, we're going to get to the gun situation, because I don't like how you slided the 10 millimeter. So we're going to talk about that. However, next point of action, Dylan, hunting licenses, locking tags. What did we do? Would you recommend it again?
Yeah, so I believe we all, everybody on this call anyways, ended up getting 2 tags you can buy up to three deer tags for, and I believe, don't quote me on this, Garrett would know for sure, but I believe that's specific to the Kodiak area, correct? Three.
Yep. No, you nailed it.
Okay. So yeah, we all ended up getting two. You know, it was one of those, we were in Anchorage buying the tags, and I was contemplating three. I think a few people were contemplating three tags, but with the amount of people that we had and stuff, we ultimately decided on two. And those were right at 300 a piece,
Yep.
I believe. Yep.
They're 300. Exactly. Yep. So I'll walk you guys through the kind of the cost breakdown, license tags. Again, Logan kind of show this for those watching. We decided to go into the regional fish and game office in Anchorage as well and bought everything. So opposed to going to maybe, you know, like a sporting goods store, we wanted to go directly to the source and verify that we're 100% dialed on everything we need. The guys in there were super helpful. And honestly, it's like one of the coolest fish and game offices around. There's so many interesting things that they have displayed that were taken both legally and unfortunately illegally, but makes for a real nice display in their office. So would highly recommend that if you have some downtime in Anchorage, is just get all your stuff there. You can certainly do it online. There's a lot of different ways to do it. So what we'll walk you through. So an all game hunting license for non-residents is going to be $160. We were going to be fishing. So you can do a non-resident fishing. They have it broken down in a lot of ways. You could do a daily license, and they've got it, you know, annual and everything in between. A 7-day fishing license, though, for non-resident you're looking at $45. You need to have your king salmon stamp. If again, you're going to be targeting salmon, a 7-day king salmon stamp is $45 as well. You could do a combo hunting fishing license. So the hunting license would be an annual one, and the combo could be a 7-day fishing license. That would be $205. So where I'm getting at is there's a lot of variabilities depending on how you want to kind of, you know, format and schedule your trip. When it comes to the waterfowl component of it, which we'll talk about here shortly, you're going to need the Alaska annual waterfowl stamp. That's $10. And then you also need your federal duck stamp, which is $25. To Dylan's point, the deer tags are $300 each, and you could get up to 3 for Kodiak. And so lots of options again there. And then, how does the fox hunting work? I know we had a lot of questions like, so do you have to buy something in addition to fox? What does that look like for fox?
So, I mean, no, if you have your hunting license, you're allowed to hunt and harvest 2 fox per season. Super easy. Now, there's a stipulation to that rule. If you were to have a trapper's license and you were, like, say, a resident and you have a trapper's license, then after November 10th, I believe it is, there's no limit on the fox. So that's kind of a separate deal. If you're harvesting, if you need more than 2 fox, you're already doing pretty good. That's pretty generous. The 2 deer tags also, by the way, that's a very smart idea. I see a lot of people show up with 2 deer tags versus the 1 or 3, and it works out really well. You're able to kind of harvest an animal and then still hold one, you know, still kind of go out and have that second one in your pocket, right? It'd be bittersweet if you were done on day 1 and you had to watch everyone else.
Yep. Yeah, especially
so
for that one too. I'll just say real quick, I think 2 is a perfect number. I would do 2 again. I wouldn't do 3 and I wouldn't do 1. The first deer, you know, we were not selective in the sense that we were passing up a lot of deer. You know, we did look at a few deer that didn't get us excited and didn't pull the trigger early on. But the 2 tags just allows you to do that, right? Fill a tag, one of your 2 tags in the first few days, and not be like bummed out and just like, oh man, now I'm, you know, not that it would be a bummer just to go hunt with your buddies, but you know, you still have a tag in your pocket. So then kind of what we were doing is, you know, let's get a buck down, fill that first tag, and then try and be a little bit more selective for the second one. And so, yeah, going back, I would do the same thing again. I would get 2 for sure.
So we kind of covered the waterfowl component as far as like tags, licenses, things go. Is it any addition once you're on the boat to, if guys want to go out and try to shoot some ducks, and what could a waterfowler expect? Like what what are the species that are going to be around Kodiak?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we build everything into one. You get to pick how you want to do your week. And that's kind of the beauty of it, because no week is the same. If we get to do this, you and I, year after year, not one week is the same. So you guys are really deer focused. So you got to do every single day on deer. And then Matt, we got to jump out with Matt a couple days and do some ducks. You got to jump out there on the last day. So it's all the same price. So if you want to fish, hunt ducks or hunt deer, it's all the same price. On that, the two biggest ducks, and just straight to the answer, that people come to Kodiak for are Barrow's Goldeneye and Harlequin. Those are the two ducks. We have a bunch of puddle ducks. You have, mallards, couple pintail, some widgeon. There's teal around. But for the ducks that people come to Alaska for, we have all three scoter species. We have the surf scoter, black scoter, white wing. We have long-tailed ducks, also known as old squaw, or formerly known as old squaw. We do not have eiders. That's the one species that I get asked for all the time, and I wish we did. We do have emperor geese, which they do give out 25 tags per year in Unit 8, or in Alaska, that you're able to use in Unit 8. But we don't get a whole lot of them. There are some guys that do a really good job on that outside of us. So the two ducks that you and I could high five over is Barrow's Goldeneye and Harlequin. We have a really good, really healthy population. We kind of touched on that a little bit during your hunt. We found a really good mountable drake. We found a couple of those, and then we stopped. We could keep, we could have harvested a couple more, but then, we could save those birds for another week or another month, where someone comes in and it's their dream to go get a Harlequin. That way we're able to kind of do it over again. So, just taking care of the resource.
And so just so you guys know too, G has all the decoys, necessities, whatever. Obviously, if you bring your shotgun, that's Matt did. He brought a shotgun and a rifle. So he had kind of planned. He's a big waterfowler and super passionate about trying to get the Harlequin on his list, and was able to do so. But Garrett's got some stuff available and just really knowledgeable on that front as well. So really, like, what you're looking at is the Sitka deer hunting opportunities are endless. So many deer in various components of elevation and terrain and topography. We haven't discussed it yet, but archery hunting is 100% doable. I will say though, like where we were hunting specifically, I'm glad we had rifles. I do think there's other parts of the island that are probably more advantageous for archery hunting, but certainly an option. A lot of guys will try it and do it. You got Sitka deer, you got the fox component. Two of those they're fun. You've got the red fox, the cross fox, and the elusive silver tip that what I guess is what really just like a gray fox typically. Is that like the technical term, G?
Same. They're the same fox. It's just it's a slight, they're consider them a color phase. So you have your red fox, your cross fox, and then your color phase of what we call silver tip. They're by far, for some reason, they're always the smartest and hardest to get after. So it makes them the most sought after. Those are our unicorns. If you can find a silver tip, you got a unicorn.
Very cool. We saw a couple. I don't think anybody on our trip that got one. Lots of cross fox, cool red fox. That's just another fun component. It's we kept, like, a lot of people have asked too, like, why shoot a fox? There's a lot of history on Kodiak of just like why there's so many fox that you can certainly research, but there used to be some, I believe, farming of foxes back in years ago, and now the population's exploded on Kodiak. But every fox that we took, we tubed, so kept all the capes, and the capes are all in the tannery right now, getting soft tanned, is what most everybody did. Certainly super pretty, and it was just another little fun adventure. So those are like your three main components. You got the waterfowl, you've got the deer, and then you have the fox. Like, those are the main things that we focused on. And then certainly if guys want to fish, that's a possibility. Kind of touched on that earlier. And then we were a little bit fortunate in our group. we had a couple residents of Alaska who had mountain goat tags. And so they were able to pursue mountain goat on one of the days. Brian ended up getting his very first ever mountain goat, which is super cool. So obviously saw those. And then we saw, a handful of brown bears as well. But overall, that's your cost breakdown. So there's probably a few other things in there, food, whatever you might consider, but overall that gives a pretty good kind of indication of what you could expect from licenses and tags. Also, travel, logistics, things of that nature. Anything I missed or we missed, G, that we should talk about?
Did we have a total tally on that, or do you want me to talk about the other breakdown?
Yeah,
because they're
like any resources are welcome.
Yeah, awesome. So there's a group of guys from Hunting Full, Austin Atkinson. They're at Hunting Full. He's done the trip with me a couple times. All those guys they're absolutely awesome people, equally awesome to Brian and Dylan and the crew. They did a total cost breakdown as well, and this was before the tags were increased. They counted like the whole kit and caboodle from the time you leave your house to the time you get back to your house. You're going to spend $5,500. That's what it costs them. That includes everything that you just broke down. Now, if we account for inflation, then we're going to add, $300 onto that total for for the 2 more tags. It is a very economical trip for leaving the lower 48, going to Alaska, doing a lot of as Logie Bear says, do a lot of Alaska things and then come home.
So we've had a bunch of other questions. We're going to try to run through a handful of them. I think one of them that a lot of folks have asked about. Let's talk Kodiak bears.
Oh yeah,
Dylan.
This
kind of goes hand in hand with the sidearm talk. So
yeah, I mean, I've born and raised in Montana here, so used to hunting in and near grizzly country. I will say though, I have never seen, knock on wood, it'll probably happen now that I say this, I've never seen a grizzly in Montana. I've seen very fresh tracks, sign, I hunt elk in grizz country, so I'll always be prepared. I ran into a few grizzlies down in Wyoming, but I will say, I mean, Kodiak, I think at first it's kind of more the stigma, right? Like a Kodiak brown bear. To my knowledge, what little research I've done, they're one of the largest bears on the planet, right? Like there's Kodiak brown bears and polar bears are kind of the 2 largest from what I've been able to find, but there's just a lot more of them. I read something to where there's like a bear every square mile or 1.5 square miles.
Every mile. Yeah.
Every mile. So we saw, I think with the couple cubs that we saw too, I think we ended up seeing 6 or 7 while we were there. Some guys saw less, some saw more, but we're running into tracks and stuff. And it's just, with that many bears around, you're constantly aware of your surroundings. I would say a lot more so than if you're in Wyoming or Montana, with the grizz population. Especially on packouts and taking care of meat. I'm used to in Montana here, if we've got a successful elk hunt, even in grizz country, kind of taking 30, 40 minutes and decompressing and soaking it all in and, enjoying it, high fives and retelling the story, 10 different ways. In Kodiak, it was just different. We notched a tag and basically you get up there and you take care of the meat as quickly as possible. A little bit on edge. So like, for example, when Brian shot his buck, Logan basically stood, on guard, if you will, just on bear patrol. And, even when it was just me and Matt filled a tag and it was just 2 of us, like I didn't touch that deer with Matt. Like I was just standing, looking for possible bear threats and stuff while Matt was taking care of the meat. So it's just a lot more on edge. And we had everything from air horn to 44 megs to bear spray, all sorts of different stuff. So I think,
how the hell did I get stuck with the air horn? Good Lord.
I feel like that's about as effective as a can of silly string. Gotcha, bear.
Listen, we were a little short on bear spray once we got to the boat, and Garrett was like, I got this air horn that actually somebody used it, earlier in the season, and it was effective on deterring a bear from the kill site. So it's better than nothing. It's like, all right, I'll take it. But Dill, what was your sidearm of choice?
I've got a Smith & Wesson 44 mag. It's the 329 PD. I believe it's kind of their ultralight 44. And I bought that a few years back, kind of specifically for hunting in grizzly country in Montana. And it's lightweight. The reason I wanted that one particularly is because it's light enough that it's not bothersome to bring. I mean, it's not forgiving to shoot, especially when you're, shooting 310 grain bear loads out of it. Like, it hurts. It's not an enjoyable gun to just go shoot recreationally, but packs a punch and it's lightweight. So that's one I brought. I do also have a 10 mil. I think there's certain applications in Montana. There's times where I'm going to carry my 10 millimeter over the 44 if I want more rounds. The 10 mil is really nice, 15 round, versus 6 in my 44. But yeah, that's ultimately what I took, is the 44 with like hard cast, I believe HSM bear loads.
Logie Bear, what did you pack?
So I had the Glock 29 chambered in 10 millimeter with the little pinky extension on the mag. And I really liked it. The Glock 29 is kind of a smaller carry than the Glock 20, smaller in frame, but striker fire pistol, and no, it's really reliable. And I mean, with the conditions of Kodiak, Glock's kind of unstoppable. We also had these, who makes those holsters?
Diamond D.
Oh, no, we had
like White Bone holster or something.
Why am I blanking on this? I got it written down on my handy dandy sheet. Ivory holsters out of Boise.
Ivory holster. So essentially it's a Kydex holster that you're able to attach to the belt strap of your backpack, and covers the trigger, everything, slide. But I think I did a practice draw at least 15 to 20 times a day. Just practice draw, make sure I was good. I never had to pull it out on a bear or anything, but I took the pistol that I've shot a lot and that I feel comfortable with. I contemplated going out and getting, 44 mag, just essentially for this trip, and to own a 44 mag. But when it came down to it, I was really thinking about what pistol do I shoot well, what pistol am I confident in? And that just happened to be my Glock 29 chambered in 10. There's a kind of a controversy there, stopping power, penetration, velocity. But I mean, if I'm firing, a revolver versus striker fire, I like to know that I can get 10 rounds out there pretty dang quick, whether it's 10 millimeter, 9 millimeter, 45 ACP. There's a lot of hot lead flying really fast.
So this is just a perfect segue to G, who's going to provide lots of insight. But Garrett, I'll never forget one of the first things you told us after our boat orientation was, whatever you do not shoot the bear. Do not shoot the bear. Why do you say that?
Because if you have to shoot the bear, you're like, at the point that you realize you're going to shoot the bear. If you think I'm going to have to shoot this bear, if you're thinking that, you don't have to shoot the bear. If you actually find yourself in a dangerous situation, you will naturally shoot the bear. Trust me. It will be at about 10 yards and still coming. Bears don't want to mess with you. They get they've been hunted on Kodiak for decades upon decades. They understand what people are, and for like 90% of the time, they want nothing to do with you. When you kill something and that death, that smell goes down the valley and a bear comes in, he doesn't want you. He just wants the deer. So as long as you have the ability to separate, then most of the time you're fine. With what we call DLPs, defensive life and property, that's when people will, in threat of their life or their property, will have to dispatch a bear. Typically, and there's typically 30 of those on the island per year. For those 30 bears that are dispatched for DLP reason, there's probably over 1,000 false charges over the course of fishing season, hunting season, residents in and out. that just have very, very close interactions with bears. It's a very low percentage where you actually have to. Now, I've been a part of them. I've seen them. It happens. There's bad situations. There's hungry bears on bad salmon years. There's bad situations that even though you do all these things right and you try to position yourself so that you guys are safe, something happens. It happens. It will happen at some point. And you're going to see bears. We see bears every week. Sometimes you only see a couple. Sometimes you see 17, 18 of them. Every week is totally different. There have been DLPs on Kodiak of Kodiak brown bears with 22s with people ptarmigan hunting that had to put a bear down with a 22 rifle. There have been people with 338 Lapuas, right? It goes everywhere in between. The gun that is comfortable with you is the best. Pepper spray is equally effective by the study. Me personally, I'm a firearm person. Other people, people have shot themselves by accident, because they get so antsy. And I did a Kodiak brown bear hunt previously, harvested a bear, had a second bear come in, and I was jumpy. I was a little bit jumpy. So comfort is the number one thing. I can't stress that enough.
So walk me through real quick to kind of tie into this, because I think this is a super important, discussion point, as most people in the lower 48 just have never experienced Kodiak brown bears. What is the recommendation when your hunters have a downed animal? Walk me through like the protocol. Like here's how you tell anybody, joining you on the charter service, how they should handle from the moment they fire that shot and the deer is shot until, you're back down on the beach and being picked up on the skiff.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely. So, and I'm going to start with leaving from the boat. We try to keep you guys in as safe country as possible with weather. So typically that means I'm using land as my barrier. So you have your land mass, boats pointed into it. The wind is always coming from the ground to the boat. So you're hunting with the wind in your face, which means when you harvest an animal, hopefully that wind is generally going to the ocean. So that kind of helps you out automatically. When you have an animal down, you start the timer. Within 45 minutes, you should be leaving. As soon as you drop that animal, start the timer. 30 minutes if you have 3 people, you can do it in 30 minutes. Typically it takes 45 minutes to fully break down an animal, because you have to take the rib meat, the neck meat, the brisket, every single portion of that animal in the state of Alaska. So 45 minutes, animal drops, you run over, quick little smile, quick photo, awesome, and then break out the gear. For me, I always put my gear away from, I assume, okay, bear's going to come in, how am I going to get away and able to grab my stuff on the way out if I have to leave before I'm done. So I put all my gear wherever the animal is, where the bear would come in on the wind line. I put all my gear so I'm exiting towards the boat with my gear, if hopefully that's the scenario. And each and every game bag, I have everything basically ready so that if my spotter's like, hey, bear's coming, we have 2 minutes, then you could stop what you're doing, bag and put your game bags in your pack while you're going the same direction out, if that makes sense. You don't want it to look like a college dorm room where it just turns into a yard sale of trying to slam stuff. You're going to have a bad time. And then, so when you harvest an animal, you're like, hey, G, home base, we got an animal down. We're approximately probably an hour out. We'll give you a buzz when we're on foot, but we're a ways back here. Awesome. So I know that you've harvested an animal and you're coming back. When you're headed down, G, starting to get really close. Looks like ETA is about 10 minutes. Please tell me that. Funny story. 2 weeks after you guys left, a group of guys that have been out with me before forgot to radio in. They show up on the beach waving their hands like, hey, we're ready. I'm looking at them like, they haven't radioed yet. And they're like, gee, I'm like, okay, there they are. We're ready for pickup. We got a deer. I'm like, awesome. I set down the radio and I look back, and there's a 8.5-foot brown bear standing on his hind legs about 40 yards behind him. So they turn around too. And this entire mess unfolds. So I run in with the skiff. It scares the bear back from 10 yards to 40. And they hop in, they throw the deer in, and we zip out. And that was a very lucky scenario. I don't want to be the deciding factor on whether you get to arm wrestle a brown bear at the beach. So if you radio me like, hey, we're going to be same beach, ETA 10 minutes, or we're about a half mile north, there's another location, looks really comfortable. I see small gravel, no boulders, good to go. We'll see you down there. Awesome. So, and we'll talk before you leave. You know, when I'm dropping you guys off, you know, and I did this with you, Ryan. I said, if you guys harvest anywhere to the north, there's multiple beaches that'll be good. Anything to the south that you're going to get cliffed out, I won't be able to pick you up. So I can pick you guys up anywhere from here to the north and you're good. If you go south, it'll be about a mile before we can find a spot. And then awesome, thumbs up and go. So
that's one thing with the just the bears too. You know, when Logan shot his buck on the first day, I think I was a little unorganized. Like by the end of it, I was dialed. So like little things that, you know, down here in the lower 48 or just where I typically hunt, you don't even think of, right? Like little things like on my XO pack, I always have the strap keepers, right? And I like to keep all the straps, you know, nice and tidy and rolled up in the little Velcro things. Well, when you harvest a deer, little things like undoing the strap keepers to, you know, extend the straps on your pack, just every little thing like that takes time. So by the end of it, like I had my kill kit at the very top of my pack, all the straps completely undone. So, you know, I could get in my bag quick, kill kits easily accessible, not at the bottom of my pack. So not digging all my stuff out to find my knife. And so just little things like the end of the trip, I felt way more dialed and prepared, especially when taking care of an animal than the beginning of the trip. And just, you know, you don't think of that going into it. I've never shot an elk or a deer here in Montana and been like, hey, I need to get this deer in the pack and going within, you know, 30 minutes. So it was an experience for sure, but definitely part of Kodiak, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Like the closest bear that we saw was probably, you know, I'm sure at some point we were closer than this, but the one that we physically saw was about 300 yards from us. And for that particular hunt, we were looking at a buck, one of the nicer bucks that we had seen of the trip, and we were kind of just sitting on him waiting. And all of a sudden I looked up and saw a bear standing basically in the same location. So we had a decision to make, because even if the buck stepped out and we were able to shoot the buck there, we didn't know how long it was going to take for us to get around. It probably would have taken us 45 minutes just to get around to the deer, even if we dropped him in his tracks. So, you know, we're like, hey, a bear's over there. The wind's not good. If the buck steps out, we're going to be 45 minutes to an hour possibly. But by the time we traverse through this drainage, find an area where we don't get cliffed out and get over to him, like we made a decision ultimately just to back out and hunt a different area because of that. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely dictates a little bit of your hunt plan.
Yeah, the way the wind was blowing too, where that bear was heading down into, had we shot a buck, the wind would have been carrying the scent of that carcass right down to where the bear was headed, right? And so just, yeah, we made the decision to bounce. But I think, yeah, like getting organized and prepared was key. We also utilized contractor bags, which were helpful in the sense that you can minimize like the blood in the scent of a deer on your pack, preferably not getting bloody. That was super beneficial. And then, you know, just every little thing that Dylan mentioned, being more optimized, more efficient, making sure that when we got that deer all cut up, we could quickly get it in the bag. We started like undoing our packs, you know, putting on like, you know, the typical way you do a mule deer or an elk, and at the end of it, we legitimately were just like, open up the main bag, throw the entire contractor bag in there, and just go.
Yep.
You know, chances are it's not going to be it's going to be maybe a little bit of an uncomfortable pack, but it's not going to be terrible. We were super fortunate though. I think we took Garrett's advice seriously, and we made a point to really try to control what we could control and avoid conflict with any potential bears. To his, you know, like you mentioned, sometimes you don't have that luxury. Like you're going to deal with some things even though you did everything right. But I know our group was fortunate in the sense that we weren't in any of those uncomfortably, awkward situations. And probably the hairiest was packing Logan's deer out. It was pitch black, and when we got on the radio to let Garrett know, like, our ETA of hitting the beach, he's like, just keep in mind, like, I just saw 2 brownies, to your north. Just, there's no problems now, but just be aware. And going out, I think it was either Dylan or Matt saw eyeballs in the headlamps, in a thicket, and I think that elevated the heart rate substantially for all of us on the descent.
Yeah.
What went through your mind when you saw that? Oh, this is where I die.
When
It was some quick backtracking. We
Yeah.
got cliffed out, and I remember because we radioed when we saw the boat, and I think we said something like, "Oh, we should be there in like 20-30 minutes."
Which means an hour.
Yeah, I think it was like an hour and a half by the time we got cliffed out. We're studying the map, trying to find, the best route out without having to cross the creek again, or river as it kind of was. But yeah, I came around the corner, and just with my headlamp, I saw eyes, and it was more than likely probably a deer or a fox or something. But yeah, we were on high alert, so saw eyes and quickly backtracked and made a big loop around the other way.
Well, it was like our first experience,
Yeah.
we didn't even know we were going to hunt. We got a lucky half-day hunt. And literally the first beach we got dropped off onto, just giant brown bear tracks right in the sand. It was just your welcome to Kodiak moment. And then lo and behold, we saw a sow and a cub later that day. And then, Garrett says, "Hey, you're coming out and we can see bears." So we're just like, we're really doing it. We're really in bear country here.
you just really had to,
It was just,
we just really accepted it quickly.
yeah.
Like we're in this.
100%.
All right.
And
A couple of things. So yeah, go ahead. Continue.
No, you guys, I can talk about this here. You guys did a lot of things right, and that's really what helped you kind of stay out of the woods. You can't predict anything especially when it comes to bears. If you knew what they were going to do a moment from now, then you'd know more than the bear. It's kind of a famous saying. But you guys did a lot of things right. You got your animals. You were cautious on your wind. You used OnX on your waypoints, and you avoided those kill sites. That was probably the number one thing. We had a DLP this year because of that exact issues. They went right back to an old kill site to go deer hunting again. You were in and out on your kills, and and you guys were out all day, so you got to elevation quick, and you got to vantage points quick, and you were able, you knew your surroundings. You knew your entrances and your exits and where to avoid and not have issues when you were packing out. That was probably the biggest thing. Those I live by OnX from the boat perspective because of the land ownership is huge. So I know, what's state ground, what's native ground, and that's big for me. You guys also, I can't speak enough about how crucial it is to know how to get out. People taking a line up and a line out is the difference between getting somewhere in 30 minutes and getting somewhere in 3 hours. Oh, yeah. Now, what was your segue?
No, so I was going to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit more about Sitka black-tailed deer as a species. So I'd love a little insight from you just on the health of the deer herd. We kind of talked a little bit about that on the boat, depending on the portion of the island, how the deer are faring, and then also, what's considered like a good buck from an age class category to, maybe those that are more interested in scoring a deer and antler size. Help us kind of understand that a little better. It is obviously we're novices to this particular species, and I know there's a lot of other folks that are just interested in learning kind of what would they expect in that category of, the hunt.
Sure. So, and I may be off by a small margin on this, but I'm going to be pretty darn close. So your Pope and Young is 90 inches. Your Boone and Crockett hits 103, and Trophy is 108. Black-tailed deer, they're going to remind you a lot of mule deer. The mannerisms, how they act. They're smaller, antlered animal, smaller legged, but not necessarily smaller body. They are smaller in body, but they're not small like you would, like the stories that people generally connotate before they come up. It's a larger animal. You're going to be packing out bone in. What do you say, 70 pounds on your back? Give or take, depends on how much you trim. You can lighten that down considerably, and it can get heavier considerably if you're trying to do a cape or whatnot. But that's your typical, score. So age grade, you're not going to see. The island is dictated by weather. The health of a herd is not dictated by hunting pressure. We harvest approximately 5,000 animals off the island per year by hunter. And, did I cut out there? All right, the wife just called. So we harvest about 5,000 animals per year as a hunter base. Winter kill might take 1,000 out. They might take 50,000 out. You never know. Weather is the deciding factor on the health of the herd. So keeping track of winters and winter kill is something that you can't do by the Fish and Game website. You'll get a good idea if you call the biologists in the local area. They're very informative. They're also very busy. So another way to do it is to just do some looking around on forums. I've used that as a really good tool. So the biggest thing to know is they're very resilient. They'll bounce back and explode just as easily as they'll drop down. So if you have a rough winter, you may see a tougher year in a localized area, but not island wide. Very seldom is it island wide. So if an area is lower deer numbers, one basin over might have 0 winter kill, and there could be a very healthy population just next door. And when you talk about mature bucks that people are typically targeting, that's 3 years old or older. So if you're, in that 3 to 5 year class is typically where you start seeing really good representation of a black-tailed deer. And so what we here as an Alaskan, we would call it a 3x with eye guards, which would be an 8-pointer if you're, Midwest. So that's a good representation. If you get into like a trophy class or what's not common that you kind of look for, when their G2 starts to split, and you start seeing those split G2s kind of similar to a mule deer, that's what connotates that's an older deer, or he's doing really good nutrition wise and really good genetically. And when he splits, that's your trope. That's what, anyone that really digs in deep for blacktails, when they see a split, that's what you look for. And if he's double split, then jackpot, high five. That's a great animal. But yeah, and we saw a winter kill on the island last year. Certain portions of the island got hit really, really hard. Other portions didn't get hit nearly as bad. So I bet you we saw probably a 25% drop island wide. And then in some localized areas, there was probably 80 and 90% winter kills. What we ended up figuring out later on in the season is a lot of the interior deer that were in that thicker country actually did really well. They were able to kind of get away from whatever ice storms there were. And most of our deer, if they do get hit by a winter kill, it's either in March or April. It's at the very, very end, because they're built for winter. They can withstand winter. They can't withstand a long winter or ice storms. So when you get freezing rain, that'll basically put a big layer of ice over their food and water source, and they can't break through it. They can deal with snow. They can't deal with ice. So if you get a big ice, a big westerly ice storm that comes in, everything on the Western Cape didn't do so well. But as soon as you get on the lee side of that, so if you have a mountain, all those deer that winter on the western side of that mountain might not have done well, but everything on the east side is perfectly good. And that's typically what we'll see. So a big thing for us is to try to make sure that we're, transporting. We have a very big transporting area for that reason. So if a place isn't doing so well, between me and, and Johnny, who runs the Sunday, we'll say, all right, let's leave this for a year or 2 years, and let's go expand out and just change our area. and, the troopers are really good about staying in communication with us. Hey, there's another transporter in the bay over. It seems that they're doing fine. And they said that, blank, blank, blank wasn't doing well. So they moved in. And they're like, all right, awesome. We typically know each other, and we keep a good proximity so that, no one's on someone else's, general area that they transport. Because at the end of the day, we want you guys to have a little slice of heaven to yourself. And we want them to have a little slice of heaven to themselves, for them. A good trip for me or a good trip for another transporter or guide is a good trip for Kodiak as a whole.
So you've had a chance you grew up on whitetail. You're a seasoned hunter, you've killed a lot of animals, eaten a lot of animals. How does Sitka blacktail rank on your list as far as desirable table food?
I grew up hunting whitetails since I could walk. My old man gave me a bow, and that's what I grew up understanding how to use a bow more than any other instrument. You replace an iPod with, a bow and a shotgun. So I grew up doing trophy whitetails. And my first hunt on Kodiak was like the biggest drug I could ever assume as a hunter you could ever take. Straight adrenaline, the whole bear concept and the respect of that animal and the hunt and how, much work. And then you get back to the boat and you're breaking down the animal and you're taking the back straps right there from the boat, throwing it on the grill. It's the best meat you'll ever eat, with the exception of Axis. Axis deer off Hawaii is pretty darn legit. Outside of that, it is the best deer meat you'll ever eat, period. I can't get enough of it. It's changed my lifestyle considerably, because now the wife and I mean, we love going to the store, like, oh, let's pick up some a rack of ribs and do a smoke or something. Now it's like, hey, I got 2 deer. I'm sending them home. She's excited. She's doing recipes. Our entire everything I eat all year comes from the land here. And it's not because, we're remote and we're stuck. I have a Safeway down the street. We can go to a Walmart, right? But it's just better meat. It's amazing. It changed me personally as far as my meat. And you guys got to, we got to do wild game dinners on the boat, and it was not bad.
It's good.
Logan or Dylan, what do you guys think of blacktail?
I would second that for sure. I mean, growing up, I've hunted a mix of mule deer and whitetail, and I mean, I'd say some of the best prior to this would have been, kind of like a farm-fed whitetail. If you're shooting a whitetail that's, living in a cornfield or something, like they stand out, right? Especially from like a rutted up mule deer that you'll harvest. But blacktail is awesome. The first time I tried it, Brandon made some backstrap on the boat, and there's just something I'm sure it tasted probably better than what it actually did, just because A, we were on a boat in Kodiak, and B, the deer had just been shot, the day before or whatever it was. So it was pretty incredible though. We just had some the other night, did kind of a surf and turf with some halibut and blacktail backstrap, and yeah, it's by far the best deer that I've had.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd say hands down, I've eaten quite a bit, from mountain lion, whitetail, mule deer, elk, wild hog, axis. Blacktail is up there, man. And I don't want to say it's mild, but it's one of those meats that you could feed to somebody that doesn't eat game meat or hasn't eaten a whole lot of game, and they would appreciate it tremendously. I don't want to say they wouldn't know, because they would know. I think it personally tastes better than beef. It just tastes clean. And when you're cutting up the meat, just how red and pure that backstrap looks, it's my top for sure.
Yeah, it was super delicious. I was surprised at the fat content those animals have on them too. I was super surprised by that.
Yeah.
I think Garrett did a good job of explaining the you always think like, oh, blacktail must be smaller, but to your point, like the antlers are smaller, the legs, features are maybe not as tall as mule deer, but their body size is super respectable. And yeah, when we were breaking down basically every deer, like the fat on them was crazy. For the time of year it was that was an interesting thing I wouldn't have expected.
Yeah, is that typical, Garrett? Because the fat caps like around that just really it was like an encapsulated meat packet and fat, not a ton of intermuscular, but like the fat cap was ridiculous. Is that like a common thing that you see with blacktail, or is it just like a healthy year?
Yeah, they're not those. They don't have predators, even though there's like bears on the island. They're not like scared. They aren't hot wired like a whitetail that they're running from predators. They just eat all day, and they're prepping for winter. So you have your does and bucks. They feed really heavy during the summertime. They put on all that fat. The rut hits. The does stay just at that cap, and the bucks will use a lot of that fat throughout the rut because they're doing a lot. They're working. They're guys being guys. So, at the end of the rut, first thing those blacktails do is they go. It's like a light switch. It goes from 100% running does up and down to nonstop feeding, and so those deer go straight back to, and they put all that fat back on. Believe it or not. Whereas the does have a really good winter success rate getting through because they don't lose a whole lot of that fat. Yeah, it's crazy. You'll see it. And on bad years, we'll actually kind of see it coming. The deer will have a fraction of the fat that they normally do just because that fawn basically was born in on a really light number of years. And so that deer thinks, I don't need to eat that much. So after a hard winter, like, we just had, all the deer that made it through there, it's like kind of like a kick in the pants where you're like, okay, I need to eat a lot more. And so all the deer this year that you guys saw were just stacked.
Dude,
so it makes a harder herd.
Yeah,
Right?
it's so interesting. I mean, you take the fattest mule deer or whitetail you've ever shot and like double that. I mean, seriously, like on Brian's, there was like 2.5 inches of just pure fat. I was
Think of
blown
that.
away.
Think it's a mind blow. Yeah. Think of like, for like everyone listening, like you cut open and you're like, okay, I'm going to hit meat at some point, and there's literally an ice cream 2 inches of fat.
Ice cream, exactly.
That's so true. Real quick, couple questions about rifle choice and setup. Dylan, what was your rifle choice of setup or caliber?
Yeah, so I ended up I had two rifles that I had a few, but two main rifles that I was kind of flopping back and forth. My typical rifle that I hunt with is a 7 mag, set up a little bit more for longer range capability, but in doing so, it's pretty heavy. I'm actually rebuilding that one to try and lighten it up right now, but I ended up taking a 300 short mag. It was actually, I think, my first deer hunting rifle. I've had it since I was like 13. But it's lighter weight. And another reason I went with the 300 short, I'm shooting a 200 grain bullet out of it. And I have, a 7mm 08 or a 243 that I could have brought plenty big for the deer we were hunting. But in the back of my mind too, on top of bringing a pistol, I was thinking, well, I'm out of a 243 or a 300 short mag with a 200 grain bullet, I would definitely rather have the 300. So, it's kind of just back of mind there with the bears in case you happen to be in a situation where, you had to use your rifle or something. That was another little deciding factor of the 300 short mag. But all the shots, I was practicing a lot shooting out to 500-600 yards prior to the hunt, and one deer I shot at like 40 yards with the rifle, as same with you, Brian, like 25 yards. The other one was, I think, 150. So really your shots, there is capability of some longer shots, but it's all pretty tight.
Buggy Bear, what were we using?
What were we using?
257 Weatherby.
Yeah, the 257 Weatherby mag. Tiny. It's not. I don't want to say tiny, but seriously, it's like 110 grain bullet. Is that right?
It is, yeah, light and fast.
Yeah, 110 grain bullet, but that thing is scooting along at over 3,000 feet per second, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my shot was right around 300 yards. Did awesome, did its job. Brian's was, you never know. It's like a lot of the times you're in these short quarters where it's pretty thick and you're looking at shots at around 100 yards or closer. And then you hit these open spots where you do have a longer shot. But I mean, I thought it performed exceptionally. Brian, what did you think?
Yeah, it's a sweet little shooter for sure. Now, like, I didn't think through the bear stuff because Dylan had a 44 and a 300 short, so I
Right.
figured we'd be covered because we always hunted with Dylan. So, and I had my air horn, so I was feeling confident.
Air horn aspect.
But no, it's a sweet deer rifle for sure. Good for pronghorn.
Yeah,
I liked it too because again, like the distance was probably 300 yards or less on any opportunities we truly had.
I mean, like looking at the terrain, even if we would have saw a buck, you're not going to be taking huge long shots. I mean, even if you see a buck, like typically they're going to be in branches of some sort. You might be able to see them, but you can't really see the branches, and it is a smaller target. So I would say, like 6.5 Creedmoor, 300 short, 270 short. You don't need, like a big giant gun.
Yeah, no doubt. I think lots of options there. We kind of did the same program that Garrett mentioned. We had one spotting scope that Dylan and Logan and I shared between the group of us. We all had, our binoculars, the tripod for the spotter, and that was kind of like our main optic setup. And then, Logan, you want to roll through the camera equipment that we were able to kind of capture everything? And that was a question as well that came up.
Yeah. So I took, with us some GoPros, which I would highly recommend if you're going to film in Kodiak. GoPro is going to be your best friend. Plus, if you drop it in the water, it will survive. I can't say as much for an A7R3 mirrorless. That will die almost instantly. So we did some field testing with the DSLR. Turns out doesn't like salt water. But I would say the biggest thing is charging packs, external batteries. You can charge back at the boat, of course. But charging packs, ran the A7R with a Dylan. You had the what was your lens? 18 to 200?
Yeah, I believe it was 18 or 28 to 200.
28 to 200.
It was a Works lens, Onyx lens. I believe it was a Tamron.
Yeah, the Tamron 28 to 200 would be, I would say, a fantastic lens. It's a telescoping lens. Like I said, the shots aren't going to be, crazy far. I filmed every kill shot that we had at around that 200 millimeter mark, and it worked just great. Also packed the long lens, the Sony G1 to 400. Got some epic pictures with that, some epic shots, but that's not something I would want to be packing around the mountain. I'd say crucially, you're going to want dry bags in case your camera does get wet. I mean, even if it's not raining, that dry bag is going to be crucial, especially walking through brush. Maybe it just snowed and you're going to get water and wetness on there. Microfibers and towels to keep the lens clean. But yeah, we just ran that 7R3, pretty dang hard with the new GoPro 9. That was also the big sidekick, was having that external mic on the GoPro and be able to just film with that. And then a lot of the duck hunting stuff you guys saw, and a lot of all of the mountain goat stuff that you guys saw, that was just filmed on, your iPhone 10.
Yep.
So that was really our three bodies.
A couple other things too, just like I think are interesting components that maybe some folks wouldn't think about, but Garrett has a full rifle cleaning kit on the boat. And we stored all the rifles. We usually wipe them down, put them inside. There's a dedicated bunk that just held all the guns that were out of the way and also out of the elements. But certainly one thing post Kodiak, when you're home, that was apparent almost immediately was how the salt impacted anything metal. Anything the salt touched, because you're in and out of the skiffs, you just got naturally the salt kind of air on the boat. It's just, you can't avoid it. So there's some time and cleaning on the back end just to try to de-rust or prevent rust from, onsetting legitimately anything related that was metal, whether it be on your rifle, your optics, your holsters, you name it. So pistols, I know that was something that I didn't think of ahead of time, but certainly was an issue on the back end.
Definitely crucial. I mean, that last day we were there, we kind of ran through the pistols and rifles and broke them down and everything. And it was so nice having, even just rem oil and a cloth to clean it all out. Yeah. It was funny because cleaned my pistol, we cleaned the gun, we got home. I did not clean the little screws on my holster and rusted. Just like the one little piece of metal I didn't clean. It's just rusted.
Yeah, I had to strip my bipod on my rifle completely down, and actually ended up calling the company and getting a few like different screws because I didn't take care of it right away. And there would be like, most of the bipod was fine, but like the metal pieces just were completely rusted. That saltwater was definitely new to me, and definitely interesting.
Yeah, if it's not, zinc coated or Cerakoted, it's metal. You're going to want to clean that, and hopefully sooner than later, because you get off the boat, you pack all your stuff, you get home, you're unpacking. You might not necessarily want to clean your gun right away, but you need to. So cleaning it on the boat before you even leave, huge.
Gee, what are we missing? Any other words of wisdom or advice for those considering and or already booked and planning and preparing in advance on Kodiak?
Watch your videos. You guys laid it out so well. It was, I mean, you laid it out incredibly well. It really made the whole process easy. Ask questions, the more prep that you do beforehand, the better you're going to be off, the better you're going to be when you get in there, right? And for a lot of people that have never done a DIY hunt, the best words if I can plant this in your head now is, the same as any hunt, you get what you put into it, especially when it comes to Kodiak on a DIY transport hunt. You guys were out every single morning at first light. You were not coming back until it was dark, until the last couple minutes of light in the evening. You were out all day. That's a big attributing factor to your success rate. We hunted an entire week with what you guys didn't know, but it was 30 to 35 knots and 12-foot seas over most of the island that entire week. We were hiding in this tiny little keyhole in some really thick brush, because those were our only options. And it was considered some of the tougher stuff that, some of the tougher areas of the island to hunt. And you guys were incredibly successful in what would be regarded as, thicker country. There's much worse country, but you can't really even hunt that. You guys pulled a rabbit out of a hat on tough conditions. And it was because of the effort that you put into it. And then you did it the next day, and then you kept doing it. And then it was the end of the week, and it was an awesome time. Big on the prep, really big on the prep. And you don't know that you need only like one set of pants and one set of boots until you've done it, right? Until you've like gone up the hill a couple times, and then, been able to get back home. You're like, man, I didn't pull out my gun once. Maybe next time I just bring that 300 short, or, it felt really good because I could keep my gun in a nice slicker on the back, in a solo hunter pack, keep it nice and protected. And I'll just use my pistol the entire time. Just those little things. That's it, man. You guys, just go watch the videos, because for me, I've seen a lot of people hit the mountain, and you guys hit the mountain the right way, and it showed. So credit to you. And yeah, that's what I got.
Appreciate that, man. Dylan, closing thoughts, suggestions, ideas, recommendations.
Yeah, one gear suggestion just kind of popped into my mind. One thing was crucial. I always carry a tripod just for glassing. Even if I don't have a spotter, I really like putting my binos on a tripod for glassing or for photos. But and there's several different people, companies, places out there that make these. BogPod has one, but I have one. It's basically a gun saddle that goes into my tripod. The level and the height of the brush and everything in Kodiak is unbelievable. If you're not like on the beach, you're going to have a very hard time shooting from like a bipod or prone position or even sitting. There's areas where, we would be glassing and then sit down, and even with a pack, throwing your rifle up on a pack, you still don't have enough elevation to make a shot. So one thing that came in clutch was the tripod with some sort of shooting saddle. I shot one of my bucks with that, and I believe we used it a few other times just to get elevation. Like there was times where we'd be standing, because if you sit down, you can't see to glass. So we'd be standing in super tall brush, set up the tripod. And that's the other thing too, is if we were in an area that we could shoot from, we just basically got ready to shoot, because you don't have a lot of time. So I would set up the tripod, get the rifle kind of locked in on it, and then glass, just so if a buck were to step out, you know, we're not messing around trying to get set up for a shot. It's like, there it is, get on the gun and shoot. So that was one piece of equipment that I kind of forgot about that was super handy, as some sort of apparatus so you can shoot standing up. But I mean, outside of that, yeah, I think like Garrett said, if you watch the videos, you're going to see, you know, the gear that we used on a regular basis. I ended up pretty much hunting in the First Light rain pants almost every day. And yeah, it was an awesome trip. I mean, I can't wait till I can get back up and do it again, hopefully with this crew at some point. And like I said in the beginning, you know, going into this hunt, I thought I would check off blacktail on Kodiak Island and be like, hey, next time I go to Alaska, I want to do something else. And after it, you know, I would go back and do this trip every single year. So it was super awesome. The company, the camaraderie, the boat, the setup, everything was top notch. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we get to do it again in the near future.
Logie Bear.
You guys, if you're listening to this podcast or watching the podcast on our channel and you wanted to do Alaska, do it. It's an awesome trip. You will not regret it. And if you can, get some fishing in and get the blacktail hunting done. If you've never been to Alaska before, we've said this, but it's a great foot in the door to get your feet wet and to kind of understand the programming of getting gear, getting logistics all mapped out. Get some of your buddies, and if you're going to book it with Garrett and Brando. They are the best, hands down, and Brando makes a mean meatball sub. So make sure to look forward to that. But no, you guys, if you've been thinking about doing it, it's definitely an affordable way to do Alaska, and you get to do a lot of Alaska things. You get to perhaps see a bear, you know, get your boots on the ground, hike around in the landscape. The fishing is phenomenal. And if you have trouble convincing the wife, say, babe, this is going to be the best grocery trip I've ever done. So that's what I would say. I'd say if you're thinking about doing it, do it.
Gentlemen, well put. G, can't thank you enough, man, for just sharing your knowledge and experience with our audience in a little bit more longer form. You know, just we didn't know Garrett going into this trip. We never knew anything about the charter service, but it kind of it fell in our lap, and I know it's a friendship that all of us have built that will last a long time. I couldn't reiterate enough about, you know, how well of a job Garrett and Brandon do just across the board, from the minute you get picked up to the minute you leave. You're going to have a fantastic time. And I just can't recommend this experience enough, honestly. There's just, I'm with Dylan. I would go back every single year for sure. Not even a question. It's that much fun. It's that enjoyable. The boat is something special. It's unique. It's different, that we don't get a chance to do, but you just, you know, you truly can't beat it, man. So G, thank you for everything, buddy. Looking forward to the next time we can share some time in the woods. If you are looking to learn more about a hunt like this, or book a trip with Garrett, we'll leave his information on the description box in the video, and try to tag it in the description of the podcast. But the Ninilchik Charters is who Garrett is currently working for, and you can find more information certainly on their website as well. But dude, it's been fun, buddy. Thank you so much for everything.
Brian, no, appreciate it. All you guys, it's kind of awesome getting together and seeing face, you know, especially right now. This is, the Kodiak was a total treat this year. We didn't know if it was going to happen or not with COVID. Now, the fact that we were able to make a season work, and the fact I got to run into you guys was a total blessing. It was a great time. Brandon and I personally had a great experience. And to speak on that, you know, there's a lot of awesome transporters out there. And the ones that are on Kodiak are generally all top notch. Anyone you go with, you're going to have a pretty awesome time. I'm really lucky through mutual friends that we were able to meet, and that couldn't have worked out any better. it was a total blessing. So appreciate you guys very much. And thank you. Also, can we get a t-shirt for Logie that says Alaska things with like
big
I
fan.
like where your head's at.
Big fan of Alaska things tee.
Just putting that out there. Not that anyone needs to flood the comments with some idea concepts. No, appreciate you guys very much.
Tee it up, bro.
Thanks for
Kodiak
watching,
merch
everybody.
coming up.
We're gonna have a merch line dropping soon.
Ooh.
Yeah, thanks guys. Appreciate your time. We'll catch you on the next podcast.
Awesome. Thank you guys.